congratulations on this film.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been a long and winding road to get here. Laika was formed nearly 10 years ago, and the first project that we took on to develop into a film was Coraline. And shortly thereafter, the second project that we took on to develop into a film was Here Be Monsters, which was written by Alan Snow and ultimately became the film The Boxtrolls. And so, it took all that time to turn that thing into a film. And so it was been a challenge, but in the end, I'm very pleased with the way it came out.
Why this story?
I read Alan's manuscript, and it struck me as something that it was the kind of story that I loved growing up. It had whispers of Charles Dickens and Roald Dahl. It had a really funny, biting, absurdist sense of humor like you'd find in a Monty Python sketch. It had all these wonderful characters and creatures and environments, and yet it was a big, thick, densely packed 550 some odd page book. But I thought that if we could really distill that down to the film's a really beautiful core film story, that we'd have a really nice 90-minute film out of it. But it took nearly that time, all that time, to really be able to strip away all the stuff that you didn't need to get to the core of it. And I think any adaptation of a piece of literature to a film is often an exercise in ruthless economy, and this was absolutely that. Just when we thought we stripped away everything that we could, we realized, no, we got to go even further, and that was really the process of developing the script and the story that took the lion's share of that time.
One always looks for something original in films, especially today, and certainly with ParaNorman and with Coraline, you guys at Laika have etched out a very distinctive style. How does Boxtrolls fit into your signature style?
Well, at Laika, we aspire to make films that are bold, that are distinctive, that are enduring, that are thought-provoking and emotionally resonant, progressive, and even a wee bit subversive. And so, we have a general philosophy and approach to filmmaking where, we really believe in dynamic storytelling. We believe in a lot of up and down in the emotional experience. And so we want to have an artful balance of darkness and light, of intensity and warmth and emotion and humor. And that's just generally our philosophy. And we also think that animation as a medium can be used to explore lots of different kind of stories in a lot of different kind of genres. And so with Coraline, that was this dark modern fairy tale, and so it had that kind of feeling. With ParaNorman, it was this supernatural comedic thriller that was rooted and inspired by the great Hammer horror films and the Amblin films of the 80s, and so it had that kind of sensibility, that kind of vibe. For the Boxtrolls, it was a different kind of film. We didn't want it to be anything like we'd done before. It was a more absurdist Dickensian coming-of-age fable that had these fantastic creatures and these, good-for-nothing reprobates, that it was just this really kind of fun, coming-of-age story, but it also had some big ideas at the core of it. And so it was important for us to continue to evolve and to continue to do different kinds of stories in different ways, and the Boxtrolls fit the bill there.
Now, like ParaNorman, in Boxtrolls, there is a recasting of the others, or the ghouls of the story, as being misunderstood creatures, that they're not bad, they're just misunderstood and need understanding.
Well, yeah, I think when you have a group of weirdos like you have at Laika, I think we're people that certainly understand what that's like to be kind of on the fringes of society, to be labeled, to be misunderstood, and so that is kind of a recurring idea, a recurring motif in our film. But it's also something that we think is critical for society, where people are so quick to judge, so quick to label, and so quick to base their ideas on no information or misinformation that ultimately as a society, I think it's a corrupting influence. That was one of the big ideas in ParaNorman. It's certainly an idea within the Boxtrolls, and it gets to this notion that bigotry thrives in darkness. That things are not usually like as one might think that they are. They might not be as they appear to be. That there's a difference between perception and reality. And that goes all the way through the story, that people that you think are at the height of society, these aristocrats, these white hats, they're nothing to aspire to be. They're awful human beings. They're horrible. And at the same time, Snatcher, who is the titular villain of the film, he is a really awful man, but we also didn't want him to be this two-dimensional, mustachio-twirling baddie. We wanted him to be a guy that had some dimension. So even though, on the surface he's the villain, he also has vulnerability. He has shreds of humanity somewhere within him that we can kind of, as audience members, we can kind of understand where he's coming from. Even though he's awful, even though he's truly, truly reprehensible, we all know what that's like to be denied entry into a club that we desperately want to be a part of. And so in that sense, he earns our empathy as well, even though in the end he can't be redeemed. And so I think that's just an important part of things that we do to show that things are not always as they appear to be.
I had the pleasure of seeing this film with a cinema packed full of kids.
Oh, yeah?
Now, instinctively, one looks at a film like Boxtrolls and ParaNorman and Coraline, and you kind of look at the darkness and go, geez, is this darkness really appropriate for kids?
Right.
The kids in Boxtrolls responded to every single beat of the movie, both dramatically and comedically. What is the appeal of darkness for kids?
When I think about the kinds of movies that I loved growing up, it was those kind of films that had that balance of light and darkness. The great classic Disney films, the fairy tales like Snow White and Pinocchio, they absolutely had that. The great Amblin and Spielberg films of the '80s, things like E.T. and Goonies, they had that kind of balance. And so I think when you are, reading a story or watching a film either in the safety of the cinema or in your living room on your TV, that is a place where you can explore big ideas, maybe darker issues, big challenging themes, because it's a safe environment and that that at the other end you're going to come out of it and you're probably going to be okay. And so I think, it's only within the last, 20, 25 years that there's been kind of a response to family cinema that has been really tamping down on anything that's potentially provocative or that has, tinges of darkness. And I think it's to the detriment of the films themselves. I think films can't be as powerful as you'd want them to be unless you've gone through the experience. You can't have elation, you can't have joy at the end of it without having the antithetical emotional response on the other side. And so I think by being able to go through that range and scare kids a little bit in places or be intense in places, they can really feel the joyful experience by coming through the end of the conclusion of the movie. And so that's really what's at the core of it. It's just good storytelling. And beyond that, I think that we have a deep respect for our audience, which our families and kids, and we all have kids ourselves, and it's something that we want to make the kind of movies that our kids will be proud to see.
Now at Laika, you're set up to go stop motion or CG. In Boxtrolls, as with your other films, you have fused those technologies, but with the emphasis on stop motion. Why?
Stop motion is something that I've absolutely adored since I was a kid. I loved animation when I was young, and I specifically loved stop motion. I love the Rankin Bass films, but above all, I love the Ray Harryhausen creature features. I remember running home from school after school when there would be a Ray Harryhausen creature feature on, something like Jason and the Argonauts or The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. And there was something that, as cheesy as those films can be, there was something that was so extraordinary and so magical about it that I just absolutely loved it. It was something that's been with me my whole life. And I started trying to play around with doing stop motion when I was a kid, so it's been a part of my life for over 30 years.
Right.
And I've been doing it professionally for nearly 20 years. And, stop motion was one of the very first forms of filmmaking ever invented. It was probably the first visual effect, and in a lot of ways, the process hasn't changed fundamentally from when Georges Méliès was sending rockets to the moon. But what we've done that's different is that we've fused this handcraft with technology. We've brought, we have this big swirling gumbo of production techniques that draws from every form of filmmaking from the last 100 years. We have things from the stage, from the theater. We have hand-drawn animation elements in our film. We have stop motion. We have CG. We have cutting-edge technology and invented technologies over the course of our films. It's this massive toolkit, this massive grab bag of ideas and tools that we can use to tell our films in an interesting way. And it's why these films look and feel like nothing else.
ParaNormal, absolutely wonderful film. Coraline is on its way to being regarded as a masterpiece, and I think that that's the movie that keeps Tim Burton awake at night thinking, damn, why didn't I make that movie? At Laika, what are you going for? There is a sense with your studio that you are working towards something, that you are yet to sort of hit your eureka moment. Is there a vibe at the studio that you're heading towards something? Because the stuff you do is so distinct.
Yeah, I'm incredibly proud of the 3 films that we've done to this point. Ultimately, what we aspire to be is the bravest, animation studio in the world, and I actually think we're well on our way to doing that. So, as proud as I am of the films that we've done, I'm even more excited by the films that we have to come. Because in the end, I want Laika to stand for, bold, distinctive, and enduring filmmaking, which means we have to constantly push on the medium, tell individual stories, unique stories, original stories with unique voices, and to push the medium visually, aesthetically, and in terms of the stories we're telling, into places that it hasn't really been before. And so, one of the things that I always tell people is that when they ask, how do you choose the kind of films that you make, the answer I always give is fear. And it's because, if I'm ever too comfortable, I feel like we're probably doing something that's safe. And if I'm uncomfortable, if I'm worried, it means that we're probably doing something that is pushing the edges of what you can do within this medium. And so as I look ahead, as I think of the roadmap that we've got in our next 3 films, they're unlike anything that we've done. And I'm very excited. I think our best days are ahead of us.
What was all this stuff about promoting homosexuals as normal people? I mean, I thought that was one of the really funny bits from ParaNorman. You got a bit of stick for daring to promote the idea of homosexuals as part of your story. What was all that about?
Well, the inclusion of that bit in ParaNorman actually goes to the core of what the entire story is about, which is how we, which is a story about bigotry, which is a story about prejudice, and how we kind of prejudge things based on limited or misinformation. And so we go on this whole ride, that kind of one punchline joke about Mitch, the older brother being gay. We got a lot of flack from certain circles because of that, and saying, "Oh, the whole movie was great up until that moment," and it was like you missed the entire point of the movie. And that was the whole point of the movie. But I think the thing for us is that as artists, I don't think we can hold back or water down our perspective or our point of view. We understand that people have different points of view, and that some of the ideas that we have and some of the themes that we explore may be controversial or potentially provocative. But we also think that by being true to who you are and by making a statement about something you believe in is also something that's critical to being an artist and having something meaningful to say. And so we're not going to try to be calculatingly populist in order to appeal to every possible demographic. I mean, obviously we want our films to be enjoyed and seen by as many people as possible. Any artist would. But we're also not going to compromise our point of view or our principles in order to make that happen. Right. So that is what kind of a core to who we are as artists. That we believe in inclusivity, and that I think that a core part of our perspective is a humanist philosophy, and that we do believe that bigotry thrives in darkness, and the only way to kind of to start to scrub away at that is by making people understand that these demons that we see in front of us are imagined. These are just people. And that by getting to know someone, or even open your eyes to that people that can be different from us, that is a step in the right direction.